Wheels of Quiet Horizons. Chapter 1, The First Dawn. I always believed that roads were like gentle rivers, long ribbons carrying stories from one place to another. I don't remember exactly when the thought first took root inside me, but one morning, before the sun even knew it was time to rise, I found myself beside my bike, a single bag strapped behind me, and an unmarked map tucked inside my pocket. I didn't say goodbye to my old apartment. I didn't close the windows. I simply left the key on the kitchen counter, as if the walls might need it one day. The road outside was empty, waiting, the way a blank page waits for words. I turned the ignition, felt the soft hum of the engine ripple through my fingertips, and listened to the small click as my helmet's visor settled into place. The streetlights flickered as I rolled past. Shadows stretched and curled behind me, but I didn't look back. I've heard people say that you can't outrun yourself, but I never planned to run. I wanted to ride beside myself, meet the other versions of who I could be, scattered across the places I'd never seen. So I rode slowly, letting the early chill slip under my jacket and find my skin. I didn't mind. Cold air feels honest in a way warm rooms never do. The city yawned awake behind me. I crossed a small bridge where water reflected the last stars. A fisherman sat still as stone on the far side, his line disappearing into the silver hush of dawn. We didn't speak, but when he lifted his hand in a small wave, I returned it, feeling like that gesture was a tiny promise. The world would meet me kindly. My tires found the countryside soon enough. Paved roads turned to gravel, and the gravel turned to narrow paths lined with sleeping flowers. Birdsong rose and fell around me, each note catching on my shoulders like feathers. I followed them. I think I wanted to believe they were leading me somewhere secret, someplace untouched by maps or clocks. By midday, the sun warmed the back of my neck. I stopped by a crooked fence where a single horse watched me with deep, quiet eyes. I leaned my bike against the fence, sat down in the grass, and poured water into the small tin cup I'd packed. The horse didn't move closer, nor did it turn away. It simply stood, tail flicking gently at invisible flies, and we existed side by side for a while, two travelers resting at the same mile. I could have stayed there all day. The fence, the horse, the pale blue sky above. But my wheels whispered to me. They wanted more ground, more gentle curves beneath them. So I packed my cup, brushed the grass off my pants, and touched the handlebars again, warm now under the sun. Every time the road curved, it felt like a slow exhale. Each turn reminded me that I was still here, still moving, and still listening. At a small village, I stopped for bread and honey. A woman with silver hair handed me a jar wrapped in soft cloth. She didn't ask where I was going. She only smiled and pressed her palm to mine, as if to pass a bit of her own warmth along with the food. By dusk, the sky had traded its bright blue for soft lavender. I pulled over near a field where tall grasses swayed, a gentle sea of green and gold. I unfolded my map, not to find a route but to watch the lines crisscross like veins on a leaf dot. Maybe it was a reminder that all roads are connected somehow, that each one leads to another. When the stars arrived, I lay on my back beside my bike, helmet off, jacket unzipped. The engine ticked softly as it cooled, a heartbeat slowing down to match my own. I traced constellations with my finger, though I didn't know their names. Names didn't matter. Only the feeling did, that quiet pull between here and far away. I didn't pitch a tent that night. I curled beside my bike, using my bag as a pillow. The grass cradled me, the sky covered me. And somewhere beyond the hum of crickets and the hush of wind, I thought I could hear the soft murmur of the road waiting for tomorrow. Chapter 2: The Painted Border. When dawn brushed my eyelids open, the sky was already telling me stories. Pale orange bleeding into soft pinks, a promise that the day would not hurry me along. I sat up, brushed dew from my sleeves, and looked at my bike, its frame glinting faintly under the waking sun. It felt like my only companion, metal and rubber turned into something gentle just by being here with me. I packed my small bag, tightened the straps, and stood for a moment with my hand resting on the seat. I could almost hear the road hum beneath my boots, waiting. I swung my leg over, the engine grumbled awake, and we rolled forward, slow and steady, like a whisper moving through tall grass. The landscape began to change before noon. Fields fell behind, replaced by sloping hills painted with wildflowers in colors I didn't know how to name. I passed under ancient trees that held up the sky with branches so wide they seemed to breathe. Leaves flickered green and gold as I rode beneath them, their shadows dancing across my arms. At a crossroads marked only by a leaning sign, I stopped and listened. Somewhere nearby, water trickled over stones. I followed the sound down a narrow path that veered from the main road. My boots pressed soft earth as I pushed my bike beside me. At the end of the path, I found a creek so clear it reflected the drifting clouds. I crouched down and dipped my fingers in, feeling the cold slip between my knuckles. I washed my face, my neck, the road dust lifting off in tiny rivers. Beside the creek, a mossy stone served as my seat. I unpacked the bread and honey, broke off a piece, and let it melt on my tongue. I could taste wildflowers, taste sun and quiet wind. A butterfly landed on my sleeve, weightless as a thought, and stayed long enough for me to wonder if I'd somehow crossed an invisible border, one between the everyday and the hidden. When I rose, I didn't rush. My boots found each step carefully, pressing back into the path that brought me here. I strapped my bag again, checked the fuel gauge that always seemed fuller than it should be, and rolled the bike back to the road. I didn't choose a direction by logic. I turned left because the wind seemed softer that way. The hours unfolded gently. Villages drifted by like small dreams. A wooden bridge crossing a lazy river. A row of lanterns strung between two weathered poles. Children's laughter echoing behind garden gates. I didn't stop to knock. I didn't linger to ask for stories. I simply passed, letting each place pass through me in return. By late afternoon, I reached a plain that stretched so far it blurred the horizon. Grass waved in low ripples, and the sky above was wide enough to make me feel small in the best possible way. I pulled over beside a single, bent tree, its trunk split but alive. I leaned my bike against it and lay down in the shade, my helmet beside me, my eyes tracing clouds. Time slowed here. I could feel it loosening its grip, letting me breathe deeper. I closed my eyes, and for a moment, I imagined the grass whispering secrets to my tires, urging them onward to places I hadn't even dreamed of yet. When I opened my eyes again, the sun was dipping low, tucking itself behind the hills. I rose, dusted my jeans, and straddled the bike. It hummed awake as if it had been dreaming too. We rode on under a sky that slowly shifted from gold to deep indigo, stars winking open one by one. I found a small inn on the edge of a nameless village. Its door creaked like an old friend greeting me. The keeper didn't ask where I'd come from or how long I'd stay. He just nodded, handed me a key with a wooden tag, and showed me a narrow bed under a sloped ceiling. I washed my hands in a bowl of cold water, feeling the day slip off my skin like an old coat. The bed was simple, the sheets rough but warm. I lay back, listening to the creak of beams above, the hush of wind through shutters. Somewhere below, my bike rested in the shed, its engine quiet for now but dreaming, maybe, of tomorrow's open road. And as my eyes drifted shut, I thought about the next turn, the next border painted not on any map but somewhere just beyond my sight, waiting for my wheels to find it, softly, patiently, at dawn. Chapter 3: The Wind's Language. The next morning, I rose before the inn's windows turned bright. The wooden floors creaked as I stepped out of the small room, boots in hand to keep the old boards from complaining too loudly. Outside, my bike waited under a lean-to, dew gathered on its mirrors, turning them into tiny pools of dawn. I wiped them clear with the edge of my sleeve. The engine turned over gently, as if not to disturb the hush of the waking village. I pushed the bike past the sleeping houses before I let the wheels carry me forward, past the last gate, past the stone well, and onto the narrow road that curved like a ribbon through the soft hills. The wind was different here. It carried whispers from places I hadn't reached yet, a language spoken only to riders and drifting leaves. I leaned into it, letting it press against my shoulders, slip past my cheeks, and tug softly at my collar. It spoke in sighs and murmurs, never louder than my heartbeat. The road climbed steadily, bending around old walls draped with vines. I passed fields left fallow, stones arranged like forgotten runes. A single crow perched on a fence post watched me glide by, its head tilted as if weighing my worth. I nodded, a silent greeting to its quiet domain. Midway up the hill, the sky broke open above me, vast, wide, full of drifting clouds that changed shape faster than I could name them. I pulled over near a low stone wall, turned off the engine, and let the quiet settle in. From here, I could see the valley below, patchwork fields, distant rooftops, a silver thread of river catching the sun like a blade. I sat on the wall, helmet resting beside me, gloves tucked into my pocket. The breeze curled around my ears, carrying scents of pine and something sweeter, maybe wild lavender hiding among the rocks. I thought of all the roads I'd left behind and wondered if they missed me, the way a house sometimes misses its keys. A pair of goats appeared on the hillside, soft bells clinking as they grazed near my boots. They looked at me, unafraid, their eyes calm and ancient. We shared the moment without demands, just breath and earth and the soft hush of grass moving under hooves. When the sun climbed higher, I packed my gloves again, strapped my helmet on, and swung back onto the bike. The engine's gentle purr felt like a heartbeat joining mine. I coasted down the far side of the hill, passing under trees that cast shifting shadows across the path. At a crossroads, I found a small stand run by an old man selling peaches from a wooden cart. His hands were worn and brown as the fruit he offered me. I handed him a few coins, but he waved them off, pressing a peach into my palm instead. It was warm from the sun, the fuzz tickling my fingertips. I bit into it slowly, juice running down my chin, sweet and cold and perfect. He laughed softly at my surprise, as if he'd expected that taste to change something in me. I thanked him with a nod, the language of travelers. He lifted 2 fingers to the brim of his hat, and I rode on with the peach pit tucked in my pocket like a promise to plant it somewhere, someday. The day drifted by in soft waves. Villages slipped past, fields of sunflowers bowed their heads as I passed. I stopped beside a stream to wash my hands again, the water cold enough to make my skin tingle awake. I lingered there, lying on a flat rock, boots off, toes dipped in the current. Above, clouds gathered, slow and heavy, but they brought no rain, only shade and the hush of distant thunder that never came closer. The wind returned, curling around my shoulders, telling me in its wordless way that the road ahead was gentle, waiting, unhurried. When dusk arrived, I found a clearing in a small grove of birch trees. I rolled my bike onto the soft earth, its tires leaving faint marks among the fallen leaves. I built no fire, needed no walls. I spread my thin blanket, rested my helmet beside my boots, and lay back, watching the canopy above shift from gray to deep blue. I could hear the bike cooling beside me, the gentle ticks and sighs of metal remembering the day's warmth. My eyes traced the narrow paths between the leaves where stars began to appear, one by one. Somewhere in the dark, an owl called once, then fell silent. I felt my breathing slow, my thoughts drift like smoke. I didn't know where I'd ride tomorrow, what border I'd cross next. But the wind would know. The road would tell me. And my wheels would carry me onward, softly, like a whisper passed from one horizon to the next. Chapter 4: The Horizon's Mirror. Morning came wrapped in drifting mist. Thin veils clung to the birch trunks, each drop of moisture carrying tiny reflections of the waking world. I rose slowly, stretched the knots from my shoulders, and wiped dew from the bike seat. My fingers traced the metal as if to thank it for staying close through the hush of the night. When the engine turned over, it did so softly, careful not to disturb the grove's quiet breath. I rolled the bike out onto the narrow trail that led me back to the road, though calling it a road felt too grand. It was more a suggestion of a path, the earth worn smooth by countless wheels and feet before mine. The world felt gentler here, like I'd slipped behind a curtain that separated noise from silence. Even the birdsong seemed softer, notes drifting through the mist and settling on my shoulders like feathers. I rode slowly, letting each bend reveal itself without rush. By midday, the mist lifted in tatters, and I found myself riding through open plains that shimmered with pale gold. In the distance, a long mirror of water spread out, catching the sky and flipping it upside down. I stopped near its edge, the tires pressing into damp earth, and stepped off the bike to stand barefoot at the water's rim. There was no wind here. The surface held my reflection steady, me, my bike, the sky above stretched wide and endless. I crouched down, let my fingers touch the cool shallows, and watched the ripples erase my shape only to gather it again. I wondered if this was what it meant to see yourself from the outside, reminder that I was here, yet also always drifting somewhere further. I unpacked a piece of bread, tore it slowly, letting crumbs fall onto the water's skin. Small fish gathered to catch them, their quick mouths making circles that danced outward. Each circle caught a sliver of cloud, a scrap of blue, an echo of my face. It felt like a kind of quiet conversation, one where words were unnecessary. When I rose, the soles of my feet pressed prints into the soft mud. I didn't mind. Maybe someone would find them, wonder who passed by this mirror that held the sky so easily. I rode on, the road winding gently along the water's edge for miles. Now and then, the sun dipped behind drifting clouds, wrapping the day in a hush that made the engine's purr feel like a promise kept. I found a village at the far side of the lake, a scatter of low houses with walls painted the color of sand and roofs thatched with reeds. Children watched from doorways as I passed, their eyes bright with the same curiosity that flickered in my chest. I nodded to an old man who sat carving a small boat from a piece of driftwood. He didn't nod back, but his hands paused just long enough to tell me he'd seen me. Near the village's edge, I stopped at a wooden dock that reached out into the water like a finger pointing at something only it could see. I sat at the end, boots dangling just above the mirrored surface. The air smelled of reeds and soft mud and something sweet, perhaps the memory of flowers blooming nearby. I closed my eyes for a while, letting the dock's gentle sway rock my thoughts loose. I imagined the horizon out there folding itself up like paper, then unfolding somewhere new, farther than any map could follow. When evening came, I found a small shack on the water's edge. Its door stood open, and inside I found nothing but an old stool and a cracked window that framed the lake perfectly. I leaned my helmet against the wall, sat on the stool, and watched the sky melt into gold and rose and finally, deep blue. The water held the last light like a secret. It held my reflection, too, softer now, blurred by the hush of dusk. I pressed my palm to the glass, feeling its cool whisper against my skin. Outside, my bike rested on the dock's end, its silhouette blending into the growing night. I knew the road would wait for me until morning, just as the lake waited for the sky. And when my eyes grew heavy, I let them drift closed, trusting that tomorrow's horizon would find me, patient and wide, a mirror reflecting every quiet mile yet to come. Chapter 5: The Endless Meadow. I woke before the first bird called out to the dawn. My breath clouded in the still air, drifting like soft ghosts through the open doorway of the little shack. The lake outside lay calm and silver, mirroring the sky's first hints of light. I packed my things in slow silence, feeling as if any sudden sound might ripple through this quiet and scatter it forever. Outside, my bike waited as it always did, faithful metal and rubber that carried my wandering heart. I wiped a thin film of dew from the seat, tracing circles with my sleeve until the leather shone. When the engine hummed awake, it felt like a whisper agreeing to another day. I rolled away from the lake's edge, the wooden dock shrinking behind me until it was nothing but a thought tucked inside my chest. The road ahead was narrow, bending between fields that lay hidden behind early morning mist. As the sun rose higher, the mist dissolved like sugar stirred into warm tea, revealing an endless meadow that stretched farther than my eyes could chase. I stopped my bike at the edge of that green ocean and listened. There was no sound but the hush of grass shifting in the breeze, an endless sigh, gentle and forgiving. I stepped off the bike, leaving it resting on its stand as I walked forward into the swaying sea. The grass brushed my fingertips, kissed my knees, tugged playfully at my trousers. Somewhere nearby, a chorus of insects hummed beneath the stalks, a secret music meant for those willing to pause and kneel down to hear it. I lay on my back in the soft meadow, arms folded under my head, eyes open to the drifting clouds that wandered above me as I wandered below. Time bent in that meadow. Minutes spilled into hours without me noticing. Now and then, I'd close my eyes, feeling the warm tickle of sunlight on my cheeks, only to open them again to find the shadows had shifted and the world had turned gently onward without complaint. I thought of all the miles behind me, cities left behind in a blur of headlights, villages whispered through, rivers crossed on old bridges that sighed under my wheels. And I thought of the road ahead, always ready, never demanding. Just there, like a hand held out in quiet invitation. When hunger nudged me awake, I pulled the last of my bread from my bag and broke it into small pieces. Birds gathered near, bold enough to hop close when I tossed crumbs into the grass. I spoke to them in murmurs, though I knew they didn't need my words. They answered with flicks of wings and bright eyes that caught the sun. After a while, I sat up, feeling the warmth on my back. My bike waited at the meadow's edge, patient as always. I stood and brushed seeds from my trousers, then walked slowly back, each step pressing a small memory into the earth behind me. I rode on through the afternoon, the endless green rolling past on either side like the pages of a book turning themselves. Now and then, a lone tree rose up, an exclamation mark in a sentence of grass. I stopped beside one such tree as the sun dipped low, its shadow long enough to cradle me and my tired wheels. I leaned against the trunk, feeling its rough bark press cool against my back. My bike stood close, its frame warm from the day's ride, ticking softly as it rested. I ate the last of my peaches, the pit rolling in my palm before I tucked it into my pocket, another small promise to plant somewhere new. The sky above me turned from gold to lavender to a soft, bruised blue. Stars pricked through, timid at first, then bolder as night claimed the meadow. I lay down once more in the grass, letting the hum of insects and the distant rustle of leaves lull my mind toward quiet. I knew the world would turn without me. Roads would curl away toward places I'd never touch. But here, in this endless meadow with my faithful bike resting nearby, it felt enough to know that tomorrow I would rise again, press my boots to the pedals, and follow whatever path the horizon offered next. Chapter 6: The Last Road Home. Dawn came as a soft touch on my eyelids, warm and patient. The meadow stretched around me, silvered with dew, each blade of grass holding a shard of the waking sky. My bike waited nearby, a quiet shape outlined against the gentle glow of morning. For a long time, I stayed where I was, listening to my breath blend with the hush of the world around me. When I rose, I felt the meadow's memory press against my back, as if it were reluctant to let me go. I packed my small bag, brushed the sleep from my jacket, and stood with my palm resting on the bike seat, my old companion of countless miles and softer dreams. I traced my fingers along the handlebars, feeling the warmth it seemed to hold just for me. The engine turned over with a sigh, familiar and kind. I guided us back to the narrow road that wound out of the meadow's embrace, its edges lost in drifting mist that held the world at arm's length for just a little longer. I didn't have a destination. Perhaps I never truly did. Each mile felt like a gentle question, each turn an answer I hadn't known I'd asked for. I passed through sleepy hamlets where windows yawned open to the new sun, smoke rising lazily from chimneys that whispered of breakfasts and quiet conversations. I waved to an old woman tending flowers in a window box. She didn't wave back, but the nod of her head told me she'd seen me, and that was enough. The road bent away from the village, carrying me into a stretch of hills that rose and fell like the slow breathing of some great creature dozing beneath the earth. At a high ridge, I stopped the bike and climbed off, leaving it to rest while I walked a few steps to where the land dropped away in a sweep of valleys and rivers. From here, I could see the silver threads of streams weaving through fields, the patchwork of green and brown stitched together by old fences and lines of trees. I stood with my hands in my pockets, letting the wind find my face, my hair, my thoughts. I thought of all the places I'd seen, mirror lakes and drifting clouds, crooked fences and silent docks. I thought of the road that always gave more than it asked for, asking only that I keep listening, keep moving, keep carrying its gentle stories in my tires and my bones. I walked back to the bike and pressed my palm to the tank, feeling its soft warmth. The engine's hum when I started it up felt like a heartbeat leaning close to mine. I rode on, down through the valleys where cows grazed beside narrow roads, their tails flicking lazily at flies that only half tried to bother them. A farmhouse passed on my right, red roof sloping low, smoke curling up from a single chimney like a drawn breath. Midway through the day, I found a roadside shrine half swallowed by ivy. I stopped, left my helmet resting on the bike seat, and stepped inside its shade. A single candle flickered in a rusted holder, its flame dancing with a breeze that shouldn't have found its way in. I didn't pray. I only stood there, feeling the hush of stone and the whisper of old wood that smelled faintly of earth and time. Outside, I took the peach pit from my pocket, the one from the old man's stand by the crossroads, and buried it in the soft earth beside the shrine. It felt like a promise kept, a seed tucked into the road's memory. Maybe one day, someone would ride past here, find shade under branches I'd never see. When I rode again, the road smoothed out beneath me, curling through fields and forests, slipping past small rivers that caught the sky in their arms. The sun drifted behind soft clouds, wrapping the world in a light so gentle it made my eyes ache. I found a quiet place near an old stone bridge as dusk folded itself over the day. I parked the bike under an ancient tree whose roots gripped the earth like fingers holding a secret. I sat on the bridge's edge, boots dangling above the slow current, watching the river carry pale petals and small pieces of sky downstream. I thought about the word home. It wasn't the old apartment I'd left behind. It wasn't any place waiting on a map. It was this, boots resting on worn stone, my bike leaning nearby, the road curling away into tomorrow's soft promise. When the first stars gathered, I lay back on the bridge, the stones warm beneath me. My bike's cooling frame ticked gently in the hush. Above me, the sky turned from dusk to night without asking me for anything more than my quiet witness. I felt my breath slow, each exhale drifting out to join the hush around me. I thought about all the miles yet to come, roads that would bend softly beneath my wheels, horizons that would open their arms wide and patient. And I knew that as long as my wheels turned, as long as the road hummed under me, I would always be exactly where I was meant to be, never far, never lost, always home.